Here's what's coming up on episode 121 of the Big Seance Podcast. Marion Hover.
I was sort of pushed into the situation of, as I say, having to go down that line of mediumship more as a full-time job. I think sometimes you have to reevaluate what's important to you and perhaps make a living or an occupation out of what you know and understand. So I'm finding in a lot of churches, especially in the UK, what I call older generation mediums feel that younger ones are perhaps stepping on their toes, when I feel there's room for perhaps everyone to have a place.
So was she, excited to hear it, or more like, gosh, thanks, Mom, for telling me that?
Yeah, I think she was a little bit, I wish you'd kept that to yourself.
Welcome to the Big Seance Podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
Over the years, quite a few listeners have asked me about ways to help support the podcast. Well, after 4 years, and after recently getting some great feedback from wonderful listeners in the Big Seance Parlor on Facebook, I'm excited to announce that I'm now on Patreon, which hopefully you've heard of. Patreon is a way to join your favorite creators' community and help them to make content you love. After the interview today, stay tuned for more details about the benefits of being a patron of the show and how to join. And I'm pumped to share the list of the amazing paranerds who have already jumped on board. If you want to go ahead and check it out, visit patreon.com/Big Seance. And Patreon is Patreon. Now on to our seance. If you are a long-time listener of the show, you know that 3 years ago I jumped at the chance to interview Marion Hover, one of our Paranerd listener friends from the UK. After reaching out to me in 2014, I immediately realized that in the UK, there seemed to be a difference in the world of mediumship and even spiritualism compared to the US. In her first message to me, she introduced herself as a platform medium, for example, and I was like, cool, what's a platform medium? From that moment, I knew I needed some education and wanted to connect with her. I must mention that some wonderful synchronicity was also going on around the same time, because I was also communicating with Claire Broad, who is also a working medium from the UK, and her and Marion weren't at all connected. My first episode with Marion Hover was number 37 from July of 2015, and the very next episode was Claire Broad. In that first episode 3 years ago, Marion and I talked about what platform mediumship is, growing up in the spiritualist church. We talked about development circles and modern spiritualism and what it looked like, her experiences with the Ouija board and table tipping, and she had a chilling story of helping to save an older gentleman's life while trying to give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and then being able to witness the very moment he crossed over. Well, I can now proudly call Marion a friend, and many things have changed for her since then, so it's time to catch up. Here's Marion Hover's return to the parlor. Marion Hover has been a working platform medium since 2006. She has a diploma in mediumship and is a qualified spiritual healer. She's also studying for a diploma in parapsychology and Reiki healing. Marion started off doing mediumship work in local churches in the Kent area, where she was performing church services and evenings of clairvoyance. In around 2010, she was running her own development circles. By 2012, Marion expanded her area by working in East Sussex at Churches and Evenings of Clairvoyance, and she's also worked in Austria and France. Marion has been on the show before, and I know most of you probably are going to recognize her voice. How are you, Marion?
Very well, thanks, Patrick. Thanks for having me back on your show.
I'm excited to have you back.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I've been thinking for a while that this needs to happen as I stay up with you on Facebook and see about some of your work. You have a website now, marionhoverclairvoyant.com, and so people can definitely check that out. And you've got a Facebook page for your mediumship work. So your life has changed a bit since we last talked. Why don't you just tell us what's going on?
Well, the Facebook page and the website, I must admit now, I don't have a great deal to do with those. My husband deals with all of that because, honestly, I am rubbish with computers. So I usually get David shouting at me saying, "You've got a message, you need to reply to this, you need to do that." But I'm getting up to speed with it slowly. But yeah, I'm not computer literate. Yeah, it's sort of been high time really, because a lot of people were asking me, "Have you got a website?" And it was like I was living in the Stone Age, really, just working around local churches. And that was all I was doing. And I had a massive change of circumstance at the end of 2016, where I had to give up work to look after, we've got a 10-year-old daughter. So I was sort of pushed into the situation of, as I say, having to go down that line of mediumship more as a full-time job. Because before then, it was literally like, I'll do it when I feel like it or had the inclination, because I was always tired from working. So it was always, in a sense, put on the back burner. So I feel like I was pushed by spirit to go down this path of, thinking I've got to do something with this. This was the greatest opportunity I had. And I thought, if I don't run with it now, I'm never going to. So it takes me a while to do anything. As my husband would tell you, I need a good kick up the you-know-where sometimes. But we would sit round, perhaps at the weekend, go down the pub for a drink, and we sort of got onto the subject of doing this as a job. And sometimes that's a bit of a dark subject with people, because as soon as you start mentioning money and making a living out of something, I think sometimes the mood can get a little bit, you shouldn't do it for money. But on the flip side of that, I'm running backwards and forwards in my car. I need to have money to finance that. So, yeah, there is that side of it. But at the moment, I'm doing a lot of work in basically like village halls. So I'll book the venue, and then we do a great deal of advertising, either on Facebook or like local with posters. And that's how I've started my own work, really. But I mean, apart from that, I still do a few churches. I've cut a lot of them short, to be honest with you, because I find some of them just too far to go. And it's sad, but unfortunately that's the way of the world now. It's I'm at a financial loss at some of them, so I've had to say, you know what, I just cannot afford to do that anymore. But yeah, what else did you want to know, Patrick?
Well, was it scary? Like taking the big leap of leaving the, traditional job to do this work. Was it scary? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yes and no, because as I say, my situation was that I didn't really have a choice. I mean, if it pinch come to crunch and I was in the situation where it was like, shall you give up your job because you don't have to? I think I probably would have said, oh God, I think that's a bit risky, I won't do it. But I was put in the situation I didn't have a choice. So I think sometimes you have to reevaluate what's important to you and perhaps make a living or an occupation out of what you know and understand. And that was exactly the situation I was in. So, yeah, I mean, as I say, if I'd thought about it too long, I probably would never have done it, because I still get scared now. I mean, you can go on the platform and people say you sort of have so much confidence when you're up there. But for me personally, I don't feel like that. I feel quite nervous, sometimes make myself quite ill before I go up and work. So, yeah, it probably doesn't do me a lot of good. But, yeah, I do love the work that I do. And I love it for the fact that there are so many people that need that help and guidance from spirit that just don't get it, because perhaps they've not been pointed in the right direction. Perhaps you've got people around them that are saying spiritualism is a bad thing, you shouldn't go down this line. And when you give that message that is absolute 100% proof for that person, it's just the best feeling in the world. It really is.
And how nice is it that, you know, when you have the need to have to step away from a traditional job to have a gift that you, I'm sure you would see as a passion, to be able to go full force into that passion and have that be your job. I think a lot of people are going to admire that braveness that you had to do that, even though, like you said, you didn't have a choice.
Yeah, it's I think being a platform medium is a blessing and a curse, because you feel very privileged in the sense that you have this gift. It is like the film, was it Sixth Sense?
Mm-hmm.
That I see dead people, because that's exactly what it's like. But there's also this sense of burden that's on your shoulders with it, because I've done some evenings before where perhaps the energies in the room haven't been right, or the energies of those that have turned up haven't been in the right mindset. And for me, the evening perhaps hasn't gone as I would have liked. And you can walk out of an evening and think, I've let people down because I haven't given them that message. But I've come to realise that sometimes the message that people want or expect isn't always the message that is right for them from the spirit realms. For example, a couple of weeks ago, I did some private readings, and I had a gentleman come through for this lady I was giving a reading to, and it was her father, and she unfortunately didn't get on with him in life. And he came through with a very valid message, and she understood it all. And it was quite an important message. But she said to me at the end, I was hoping for my nan. And that sometimes, from a medium's perspective, can be very, you can go out of someone's home or a centre, wherever you're working, with quite a heavy heart, because you can feel, though you've given that person a great message, it's not what they wanted to hear, but perhaps it's the message spirit wanted them to hear. And I sometimes don't think people always get that.
I can totally understand that. Does that kind of, I mean, I don't know if you hear people say those things in the middle of a reading, but does that kind of shut things down a little bit if you have maybe a connection already with someone else from the other side, and then someone requests the presence of, you know, someone who isn't someone you're connected with? Does that make it harder to connect?
Funny enough, that's not actually happened yet. They'll usually get to the end of the message and then they'll be like, because it's usually, I always get that if somebody perhaps didn't get on with somebody in life, or there was tension between, you know, someone that's passed that's giving this message over. Unfortunately, the sitter tends to build or pin their hopes on one particular person. So it's always much easier when you've got somebody that comes in with an open mind. But I haven't yet experienced somebody that will cut me off halfway through and go, whoa, I don't want to listen to this person. Can you get Nan, or could you get Mum come through? So I'll let you know when that happens, but not yet.
So with all of this new practice and continuous work in the area, how have your abilities changed, if any, since we last talked 3 years ago?
Well, I'm not quite sure. I think you probably have to ask people that sit and watch me. I get quite surprised myself at some of the messages. You get those random oddball messages that come through and you think, oh my Christ. And then people will come up to you afterwards and say, how did you know that? It's just like, well, I didn't. This is what Spirit are telling me. I don't know you from Adam. The message has come from Spirit, hasn't come from me. I'm just a vessel. And I really don't see myself as being anyone special or gifted, because I feel with mediumship, everyone has the ability to do it. It's just tapping into it and perhaps getting the right tutor or the right help with harnessing what everybody has as a natural ability.
Do you get a lot of people that send you validation or communicate with you after, one of your evenings of clairvoyance, and are like, you know what, this was right on, and this is, maybe some of those things hit afterward after they leave? Do you get validation later on?
Yes, sometimes. I mean, I've had a couple through on the website, but the thing that usually happens, which can be quite annoying from my point of view, is you'll be up there giving a message, and you'll always get that one person that goes, no, I don't understand that. And they'll go through the whole message like that. And then they'll come up to you at the end of the evening when you finished and go, actually, I understood everything you said, just it didn't click with me at the time. And then you stand there and think, because from an audience's point of view, it looks like you've got the message totally wrong. So, yes, it does happen, and it can be very annoying. But, yeah, that's just me that gets irritated over that. But, yeah.
I think that's one of the cool differences between the UK and here in the US is, and I've learned so much just by talking like to you and to Claire Broad about, the differences between just culture and spiritualism and the way mediums work here versus there. And so you guys do a lot of platform reading, which I think I know more as like gallery reading. I think a lot of people here would say a gallery reading. And so you are in front of a group of people and you're just kind of reading things as they come through, reading people as they come through. And I think in the US, there's a tendency to do more private readings, but you do some of that too?
Yes, I do. Yes, you're absolutely right. Platform mediumship in the UK is generally held at spiritualist churches or like centres that are run by individuals. And you can work from anything from like 3 people I've had turn up before to 40, 50 people in the audience. And I've sat and watched a lot of mediums work. And we all vary in the way we do work. Some people will literally throw a message out and people will have to try and pick it up. The way I work is generally I will most of the time know who I'm working with, but it has been over the last few months. I've got the person totally wrong. The message has been right, and it's usually like the person sitting behind or to the side. So I've literally just been out by a fraction, but the message has been right. But yes, you're also right. We generally do a lot of private readings. Me personally, I hate them because the people that 9 times out of 10 that want the private readings are, as we discussed before, they want someone particular to come through. And sometimes it's that person that comes through and other times it isn't. And I either come out of the reading feeling quite elated or deflated, one of the two.
And last time we talked, we also talked a lot about development circles, which is also this cool thing that happens in the UK. And your development circle that you were working with at the time, you were doing a lot of work with the Ouija board. And so I wondered if you have any development circle stuff going on now, and if you still use the Ouija board in any of your work.
Yes, that's right. We were doing a lot of work with Ouija. In the last interview, I think I mentioned how it all began. So when I was running the old circle, we sort of halfway through the group, we tried to sort of spice things up a bit by doing different things. And someone suggested getting this medium that we knew from North Kent in, and he was going to come with a group of people and do table tipping, which we were all interested in. So we did the table tipping, and then afterwards they just sort of produced this Ouija board and started to show us how to use it. And there were a lot of very strange looks in the group, like, should we be doing this? We're not quite sure about this. And we were sort of thrown in at the deep end. And it was an interesting night. There was a lot of discussion afterwards about it. And after several weeks and me doing a lot of research, we decided to give it a go. And this went on for several months with the board. I don't always know that we got great evidence off of it. There was a lot of activity connected to the board. Part of me is still quite sceptical about proof of who's actually communicating. And I think that depends a lot on the intent of the people that are sitting on the board. But yeah, that group unfortunately broke up probably a good couple of years ago now. And I've been on hiatus for, as I say, 2 years while my life was sort of being turned upside down with moving and job changes. And I've literally gone back in the last 2 weeks. I've been asked to go back and sit in a different circle that I used to run. But that one seems to be more based around healing energies, which is quite strange. It has been centered around chakras, healing, quite odd, very different to what I've done before.
You mentioned your lovely daughter earlier, and I'm just curious if you see any developing abilities in your daughter.
Well, Erin has been, I would say, brought up with spiritualism in some lights. She's been taken to church since she's been about 3 years old. So to her, it's just part and parcel of everyday life. On the other hand, my husband is a huge skeptic. So there's always that conflict of ideas and opinions. And it's my belief that I would never want to force my opinions on Erin. And she's a little bit like, she'll either come with me or she'll go, you know what, I don't fancy going tonight. But as we've gone on through the years, I've noticed, not necessarily so much that, I don't say she's psychic or clairvoyant. She does come up with some strange things at times, but I've noticed that there have been a couple of occasions where there have been children around her that I've noticed before. I had a very odd occurrence probably about a year ago. Would you like me to tell you what happened?
Oh, please do. Are you talking about children like from the other side, or are we talking physical children? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Erin's bedroom is right next door to ours. And I'd gone to bed one night as usual. Erin was all tucked up in bed. And for some reason, it must have been probably around midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And for some reason, I was awake. And I heard what I thought was Erin get up, go to the bedroom door, and the door flung open from her bedroom and the hallway lit up because she won't go to bed unless she's got a nightlight on. So I thought, oh, perhaps she needs to use the bathroom. So I heard footsteps go down the corridor, got to the bathroom door and stopped. So I thought, maybe she's got to the bathroom door and suddenly thought it's dark and just sort of frozen or something. So there's me, gets out of bed, open the bedroom door, expecting to see Erin at the end of the hallway. Nobody there. And I thought, I haven't heard her go back into her bedroom. And I thought, that's odd. So open the bedroom door and there she is, fast asleep in bed. And I thought that was definitely a child's footsteps. And there was no doubt that the door flew open because it hit our bedroom door. And in the morning, I said to her, "Did you get up in the night?" "No." So I told her about the story, and she said, "Mum," but she said, "if the door's open," she said, "the nightlight goes out in the bedroom." But I said, "Yes, it does generally, because normally the hallway light's on." But I said, the hallway light was turned off. So I said, your nightlight would have stayed on because it was dark outside. And she was like, "Oh my God." She was quite shocked by the whole thing. But yeah, it was interesting.
So was she, excited to hear it, or more like, "Gosh, thanks, Mom, for telling me that"?
Yeah, I think she was a little bit, "Yeah, we should keep that to yourself." I've experienced a lot of child activity around her before in our previous house. And it was sort of something we just talked about, and she generally accepted it as being just normal. So I don't feel there's any fear with her, with like, "Oh God, something's going to jump out at me at night time," or I think she's quite aware that this is, from what I understand, this is a female energy that's around her.
You did a kind of a paranormal investigation recently, didn't you? In a place called, is it Bilsington Priory?
It is, yes. Yes, very good.
Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, I looked through some of the history of it today, so I'll read it out for you. Bilsington is a place very near the Romney Marsh. It borders onto the Romney Marsh, but it's about 6 miles from Ashford in Kent. The priory was a former Augustinian priory, and it was founded in 1253, and it was suppressed in the dissolution of the monasteries in 1536, which is what Henry VIII brought about. And then during the 1820s, it was a base for smuggling gangs, which were namely the Ransley Gang and the Aldington Gang, who, if you read up about smugglers in the Marsh or the Weald of Kent area, they were absolutely notorious. The Aldington Gang in particular. And then during the Second World War, troops were billeted at the Priory, and at some point it was also an infirmary. So that's what I know about Bilsington.
Sometimes in the U.S., we really think we have a history of things. And that's just from 1200, that is, I can't imagine all of the different things that are in a building and people that are in a building and things that the building is used for, that it really makes it difficult to be in an investigation and try to figure out what's there. Are you someone from 1200 or are you somebody from 2005?
It was a fun investigation because I'd done one quite a number of years ago in Dover Castle, and that was literally like a group of people walking around, and they were told stories of what had happened in the wartime tunnels. So I was sort of expecting that, and it was very, very different. It was there was about sort of 24 people that had turned up for the investigation. And we were split up into, I think our group had 8 people in it. And we were split up with like mediums, psychics, and whoever else were doing investigations. And the first room we went in was downstairs, because the Priory now is used for a wedding venue. It's a beautiful place. And the first room that we did is now like the dance hall, and it's got a bar in it. Still looks very oldie-weldy. And in this room, we did Ouija board, funny enough. And then we did human pendulum, which is something I've never done before. But we picked up a hanging, a young girl that had hung herself. And some of the group members got quite distressed, so they called that to a halt. But it was the second room for me that was the most interesting, because the Priory is quite an odd building. It's in layers. So if you go up from the room we were in originally, you get to what would be like the church is where wedding venues are held. So we walked through this lovely setting to a little door at the back, and it has the smallest spiral staircase I've ever been up. So our group went up the spiral staircase, and we landed up in an empty room. And you've got to imagine this is pitch black, and we've got our medium who had a red torch on his head, and he was telling us about, in the Second World War, apparently there were Canadian troops stationed at the Priory, and there's two of them in particular that have come through before in previous investigations. So I was thinking, I'm not quite sure what's going on here. Now, I will tell you before I start, I mentioned this room was pitch black, but it was dirty and dusty on the floor. It was literally like an empty room with wooden floorboards, but you could hear it under your feet. It was like dust, and it was not nice. And it was November. We were all freezing cold. We had hats, gloves, scarves on. So this guy said to us, right, the Canadian chap that usually comes through, his name's Timothy. And he said he likes to touch people in the group. This sounds a bit weird. So he said, we're all going to join hands. But he said, if there's anyone in the group that doesn't want to do this, he said, you need to step out now. He said, because once we're holding hands, he said, we can't break the link. So I think we had about 3 people that said, no, I don't want to do this. So they stood by the door. And so I was watching this medium, and although I do mediumship, I'm quite a skeptic. I look at other people and think, is that quite right? I'm always questioning him. So we're all holding hands, and the medium's standing literally opposite myself. And he starts moving his hands towards our side of the circle, and he starts touching people's faces, like rubbing the chest area. And I was standing there thinking, I'm really not sure about this. I just thought, is he just moving his hands himself? So there was a young guy in the group, must have been about 19 or 20 years old. And he was saying, oh, come on, he said, I really want something physical to happen to give me that proof that spirit's here. And he was willing it so much that I thought, well, I'm really not sure about this, but I thought I'm just going to put all my energies into this young lad and just ask spirit to give him some proof. So while I'm standing there, probably completely unawares as to what's going on around me, I suddenly had this very odd sensation of being pulled from the shoulder area. Now, it wasn't like a physical hand on my shoulder. All I can say, it was like a force. And my shoulder, my right shoulder, was being pushed backwards towards the wall. And all of a sudden, everyone looks at me and was like a bit, what's going on? And I said, well, I can't help it. I said, I'm being pushed. And then the next thing, somebody's hitting me in the back of my knees. Literally, like, you know, when you're standing up, you get hit in the knee and your knee collapses.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was happening. And I remember thinking, I'm not going on that floor, because I thought it is so dirty. I thought, I'm not rolling around on that floor. Well, to cut a long story short, I ended up on the floor. I ended up with my head. Can you imagine, I'm still holding, I had my husband one side and a strange guy the other side I'd never met, still holding their hands. I was laying on the floor, and I literally got turned right round. So my head was in the circle and my feet were facing towards the wall. And I had my feet lifted at an angle of about 45 degrees. And it was, the only way I can describe it, it was like running a race and you feeling very tired and exhausted. And the young lad that was before saying he wanted all the proof, I remember him saying to me, how on earth are you keeping your feet in that position? He said, your abs must be fantastic. I said to him, I'm not. I said, I can't move. And I thought it was quite funny, because I'm not exactly the fittest of people. So, I mean, my abs I don't really even know where they are. So, the guy that was running the circle, he had to relink other people's hands so he could exit the circle and take my hands off. And I can't quite describe how he did it, but he didn't break the circle. And he got me out of the circle. And I literally lay on the floor, and it was as though I just run a half marathon. I felt exhausted. And all I could say is I could hear somebody laughing, not in the circle, spirit. And it was two men, but it wasn't malicious laughing. It was literally like, this is so funny. And I said to the guy that was running the circle, I said, has this ever happened before in other investigations? He said, I've seen it twice. And to be honest with you, Patrick, if I had been watching it, somebody else doing it, I would have probably said, yeah, it was the biggest setup going. But because it happened to me, it was proof beyond proof that spirit have the energy to physically move you, even when you're willing them not to. It was incredible, really was.
Well, do you think you gave the other gentleman the sign he was looking for?
Perhaps so, yeah. It was the thing was, I was getting questioned a lot afterwards, and I felt in a way as though people weren't believing it either. And I couldn't blame them, because I think I would have questioned what had happened. It was bizarre, really. Even thinking about it now, it's such a bizarre situation. Very odd.
Yeah, I mean, I know you as, when I think of Marion Hover, I think of this wonderful, humble, not seeking attention. I do not at all imagine that any part of you would wanted to be the center of attention in this way and, land your face in the middle of a floor.
Yes. It was funny, but it was embarrassing, because the people that were out of the circle originally, standing by the wall, I could just hear them laughing, literally belly rolling. And it must have looked hilarious with me wrapped up in a coat, hat, gloves, rolling around in dirt on the floor.
With your abs.
Yeah, exactly, with my lack of abs. But, amazing experience. I'm so glad it happened. But, next time I'm hoping they're going to pick on somebody else.
So what I think is so great about this is that you're not regretting the experience, and it seems more like, I guess, a joking energy rather than negative energy then?
Yes. Yeah, I didn't feel at all that there was any malice there. It was literally, we're going to show you what we can do now. And, I mean, I would have probably found the whole thing quite funny, to be honest, if I was watching somebody else being pushed. That
is an amazing story, and one that I'm sure they're still telling there at that location on investigations. I love that, and I love that you, feel good about it. That you'd love to have I don't know that you'd love to have a similar experience again, but that you appreciated the communication.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's, I've had many strange things happen, but that was so physical that it's hard to put into words, really, how you feel about it.
And you recently went to France.
Well, yeah, I'd say it was last August. That was another quite weird one. I had a random email from somebody that just said, would you come out and work at our centre in France? So me, sillily enough, just said, yeah, I can do that. How far away from Calais are you? Which is up near, Dover, connecting to England. She said, about 500 miles. I went, right. But it was quite odd, because last year we were holidaying down in the Vendée. We were camping down there, and we went, you know what, why not incorporate that with the holiday? So we literally jumped in the car. We did a 3-hour drive south from the campsite and literally went down to this centre and I worked there for a couple of hours, and yeah, it was all good. Very interesting.
So you're adding international work to your resume, which is kind of cool. What was the response like?
Yeah, very good. I was partially expecting it to be a lot of foreign people, but the area that we went to is known for Brits that basically go out and live in France. It's one of the most popular areas. The majority of people were all English, so there was no communication barrier.
I seem to remember us having a conversation of you being interested in taking a trip to the U.S. to do some of your work. Is there any progress on that front?
So, yeah, nothing's been planned at the moment. I've got quite a few connections in the USA with people that I know, not all spiritual, mind you, but it's always dependent on finances, because obviously USA would be a huge trip for me. But yeah, I'm always open for suggestions for any workshops, conferences, but yeah, there's nothing actually in the pipeline at the moment, unfortunately.
Well, I would love to see you here sometime. So I wish you luck on that. And yeah, people should get in touch with you if they've got any ideas or connections they can think of to get you here.
Yeah. Free flights would be brilliant.
Yes.
Oh, dear.
And same thing for me to come to the UK. If anybody has a free flight for me to go to the UK to visit Marion and my UK friends over there, that would be awesome.
That would be brilliant, wouldn't it? Yeah, we need somebody that's like a head of some airline or something, don't we?
or some billionaire just, throwing out free trips.
Exactly, yeah. Unlikely, but you never know.
Well, I am curious to know if you have advice to young or developing mediums out there.
Yeah, I think you need to be taken under somebody's wing that is experienced enough, knows the ropes, but is not ego-driven. Because unfortunately, there's so many mediums that are just driven by ego now that it's hard for people that are coming up the ranks to actually find their footing. Because I'm finding in a lot of churches, especially in the UK, what I call older generation mediums feel that younger ones are perhaps stepping on their toes, when I feel there's room for perhaps everyone to have a place. Does that make sense?
That does. That's unfortunate.
Yeah. But I feel it starts with family. If you've got a good understanding family that have an idea about mediumship, spiritualism is always a great help. But I mean, from my experience in the UK, go to a spiritual church. If you find a good one, they'll be able to help you with, I started out with development circles and learned a bit about everything, and then went on to a closed circle, which is dealing much more with development towards platform mediumship, because there's so much to learn, not just about how you present yourself and the messages you're giving over. It's learning how to stand up there and give an address about something that's spiritual, how to even do something as simple as give an opening and closing prayer. When you hear someone doing it, you think, piece of cake. But when you're standing in front of 40 plus people, your brain can go blank in a matter of seconds. And it is training. It's not always something that initially just comes off the bat. It is something you have to learn. And I would say that was probably the biggest learning curve for me, was learning how to do those, what I would call silly basic things, but they're so important.
Thank you for that. And I just want you to know that I am so happy that we connected years ago now. and am so excited to see where things go for you. And I want to thank you for your friendship. And I'm glad we were able, even though a little behind the scenes, folks, we were disconnected about 10 times today in our conversation, and several answers were repeated multiple times. So I want to thank Marion for going through that trauma today and still sounding so positive and wonderful. And so thank you.
You're very, very welcome. I think it goes way beyond me just knowing you as somebody that runs a brilliant podcast. I consider you a friend, and I'm sure I sometimes send you quite off the cuff comments and things that, that's just me. But yeah.
But no, I love it. That's what I love. Okay, I want to give you the opportunity to tell us again where we can find you. And I know you have some events coming up, some evenings of clairvoyance that you need to mention so that people can find you if they want to.
Yes, this Saturday, which is the 9th of June, it's quite close, I have an event in Ashford in Kent at Goddington Village Hall, which starts at 7:30, and that is just an evening of clairvoyance. And the week after, which is, I'm sorry I can't think of the date, but it's the Friday, and I'm at Dymchurch Village Hall. That's always a popular one. There's always great energies in that centre. But you can also go and look on my website, which has got everything that's upcoming on there. And that is marionhoverclairvoyant.com. And I also have the Facebook page, which is Marion K. Hover Medium and Clairvoyant. They both links up with the website as well. So all my up and coming events are all on there.
Marion, you totally rock. We'll put all of those links in the show notes at bigseance.com, or probably wherever you're listening, whatever platform or podcast app, we'll have those show notes included, and hopefully you'll be able to click on those links right there. Well, you rock, Marion. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for having me, Patrick. It's been a pleasure, and it's been entertaining this evening.
As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I'm excited to announce that you can now find the Big Seance Podcast on Patreon. And here's what makes Patreon cool. You can become a patron of the show for as little as $1 a month. And that $1 a month puts you at the Paranerd level, which gives you benefits of things like exclusive bonus video or audio content with perhaps my thoughts on episodes or behind the scenes, things like that. And it's all exclusive to patrons. If you feel like contributing $2 a month, I call this the Super Paranerd level. In addition, you get your name mentioned at the end of every episode. The most rewarded level is called Parlor Guest. What do you think about that? $5 a month gets a parlor guest everything I already mentioned, but they also get their name or website listed at bigseance.com with other parlor guest patrons. As I've already mentioned to members of the Big Seance Parlor on Facebook, the podcast will always remain free and isn't changing. I'll never expect support from you. I love all my paranerds, regardless of whether or not they become patrons. I'll also never hit listeners over the head with it and turn it into a permanent commercial. But for listeners who ask me how they can help to support the show, now you have a way to do it. So as promised, here's the list of wonderful people who jumped on board as soon as Patreon became available. For this one time only, I'm recognizing all patrons, regardless of level, because I'm so excited to do this for the first time. Thank yous go to Paula Mitchell, Susan Davey, Amy Park Gedicke, Josiel Lorenzo, and we already have really awesome parlor guests at the $5 level, and that just blows my mind already. Karen Prine, Norman and Linda Keller, and Anna Frias. And I want to mention that we have one patron who has chosen no reward, which is an option on Patreon as well. And so I'm interpreting that as this person prefers to not be recognized as well. So if I'm misunderstanding that, then this paranerd can let me know, because I'd be glad to give you some recognition for your support. So there you have it, our first patrons on Patreon. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It means so much to me that I already have this much support, and that's before even mentioning the Patreon in the podcast right now. So you guys rock! If you'd like to join them, check out patreon.com/Big Seance. And again, Patreon is Patreon, or just click the link in the show notes. Thanks for listening today. Till next time.
For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. You can find and subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play Music, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and just about anywhere podcasts are found. Do you have any comments or feedback? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how to get your voice in a future show. Or you can call my feedback line, 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. Interested in learning how to promote and share the podcast? Go to bigseance.com/share. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.